So let's go over to John McMullen, who's at the NovaCare Center, and let's get John now and get his thoughts on the Eagles selecting Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo with the 22nd pick and not moving up or down. And as many people were shocked, I think a lot of the great players really fell down to the bottom end of the draft here. John, appreciate you doing this. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, from the Eagles' perspective, Dan, I think it worked out really well from a board perspective. You know, I took Quinyon Mitchell as the Eagles pick in my mock draft because I was kind of given a hint how much they liked him. And I said, well, that's fine, but there's no way they're going to get him at 22. And I had him moving up all the way to 12 to get him. And he ends up being there at 22. So the board fell phenomenally to them, for them. You know, you had 6 quarterbacks going in the first 12 picks, which is astonishing. You had 14 consecutive offensive players going. That's a record. And not only is it a record, the previous record was 7, and it was 14 before the first defensive player came off the board. So all those defenders kind of fell to the second half. And he was there for the Eagles at 22, kind of amazing. So tremendous value at that selection and a player they really, really liked. You know, most time you're going to hear every single team that drafted, you know how this works, Dan, that drafted today is going to spin it like we got the guy we wanted. And the only one that's telling the truth is Chicago at number 1 overall. But the Eagles really like this kid, and to get him at 22 is a nice development. The fact you didn't have to give up anything to go up and get him.
Here, John. You're right, and I think the Eagles took the best value guy at that position because, to me, even Teron Arnold, I thought he was the 11th best player in the draft. I thought that Mitchell was the 7th best, and my only concerns are, again, in today's college football, John, you don't stay at programs like Toledo when you can make $4 million a year at LSU or at Alabama, and you're playing against Marvin Harrison once a year in the rest of that conference. There's nothing in that conference that's going to produce top-flight NFL guys mid-America. So my concern was you went to the combines. He had a hell of a combine. And what else he did too, John, according to the people at the Senior Bowl, he was phenomenal there, going up against a top-flight kid. So when you look at all the metrics, you look at it, it's a need. You want to move off, obviously, one of those corners, either Slay, who's going to be 33 in January, or you want to see what Bradbury does, and you get some more depth there. Also, you can even drop him in the slot or do whatever. So, to me, again, I'm conflicted because, like you said, John, these guys don't even have helmets. I'm not going to kill anything on April 25th when they don't even have a jockstrap yet. I mean, so we got to wait and see how he uses them. And I'm talking Vic Fangio, how he uses him in this draft. So, am I right, John, on how I'm looking at this? That I'm looking at they got the best player. I want to Chop there. The Dolphins took him before. I had Chop going 22 to the Eagles. He went 21 to the Dolphins here. Do you think they were coveting more edge, or do you think that this fell the way they wanted it to fall?
No, I think, I think they had a group of players they were looking at. It was probably Mitchell, Terrion Arnold at corner. And I think they also had significant interest in J.C. Latham on the offensive line, but he went way up there.
Way early.
Becoming, a lot of people thought he was going to go 5 to the Chargers, and it ended up Alt going 5, and then he goes 7 to Tennessee, which probably wanted Alt. So kind of flip-flop that. That was a late week thing where all of a sudden J.C. Latham became a top 10 pick, but at least from the perspective of people finding out about it. And then the kid from Washington as well on the offensive line. I thought those were the 4 guys the Eagles were kind of focused on. And Mitchell was ahead of Terrion Arnold at corner. Both of the offensive linemen were gone. So I think those were sort of the cloud of prospects the Eagles were hoping to get. And they were able to get one of them, and they got their choice of two of them. And yeah, I mean, you could talk about other needs, but I did hear you say something about best cornerback versus, and I had somebody else on social media saying, "Well, I don't want the seventh guard or the seventh tackle versus the first cornerback." But man, there's like 10 tackles worthy of being in the first round. So I
Absolutely.
mean, there's 10 tackles that are better than the first linebacker or the first safety. So it doesn't work like that. But yeah, Mitchell's a really good player, and I give him time to grow. He's going to be in a very complicated scheme. There's going to be some hiccups because big scheme is very communication heavy, and that's going to be difficult on young players. But as far as a talent perspective, he's got everything to be a top tier outside corner. And when you look at the age of Darius Slay and the age of James Bradbury, I could see Mitchell and Kaylee Ringo being the outside corners on this team 2 years from now. And to have good prospects like that is a good thing.
John, check this out in the draft here. You could, like you said, and I completely agree. This was, and I think it was because a lot to do with COVID, that many of these players like Fuaga, who's 24 years old, got that extra year of development when they were in college. And that's why you're seeing guys that are ready to play and plug in and play right now. These guys are 20. John, when I graduated, I was 21. I wasn't 23, 24 years old. And because of COVID and redshirting and transferring, you're getting an ability to get these guys ready to play right now. But listen, if 10 guys do go, and I'm with you, 10 offensive linemen, 6 quarterbacks, and then you tie in the receivers at 6, you're talking about 24 players out of 32 players that were picked within 3 positions in college football: receiver, quarterback, and offensive lineman. Is that an indication, or is that just something in the cycle that you're seeing right now for this respected draft, John?
Well, I think part of it was the cycle. If you talk, the best players in this draft were offensive tackles, quarterbacks, and wide receivers. So, part of that is just the cycle. Part of it is the way the game of football is going. It's so offensive centric, as I said. The record goes from 7 to 14, which is, again, that to me is the biggest story of the night. 14 consecutive offensive players go off the board before the first defensive player, and that's a guy with some medical issues and Latu. So, I mean, it's clearly the league has got that, and Jeffrey Lurie's been at the forefront of that. You got to have a high-powered offense in this league now to win consistently. It's not to say you can't win on a particular Sunday, but to win consistently, you need a high-powered offense, and everybody's sort of working from that template, and that's why you see so many offensive guys going. But, the real blue-chip players in this draft, quarterbacks, receivers, offensive tackle, and maybe Brock Bowers. I don't think there was one blue chip defensive player, and by that I mean,
A Jalen Carter, or a Will Anderson.
Exactly.
I don't see it either.
Exactly. Closest probably Turner.
Yep.
And evidently he had some medical issues as well, so he fell a little bit to 17, I think. But even he's not Will Anderson. He's not Jalen Carter. So, probably Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May at quarterback, the 3 receivers, Joe Alt, and Brock Bowers. Those are your blue chip players in this draft. And they're all offensive players.
Couple last questions for you here, John. John, in the later rounds now, do you think they come out of, and here, let me throw this at you here. In the last 8 drafts, Howie Roseman has drafted 1 corner and 4 D linemen in the last 8 drafts with no safeties or no linebackers. Could you see them looking at somebody like Cooper, Wilson, Colson, maybe the kid from Kentucky, if they're there at 50 or 53, because again, I mean, if the kid Mitchell, who's got the skill, if you watch him at the combines, I mean, there's part of me that likes the guy a lot. I'm just nervous about where he played in today's college football, but you address the need. So that's the thing that I'm always going to land on. And if you address the need at linebacker in the second round with one of those second round picks, where do you think they go with those 2-2s?
Well, it's always, and that's the thing. I mean, you'll hear a lot about this is the first cornerback the Eagles have taken since Lito Shepherd in the first round in basically 2 decades. So, and people will make a big deal out of that. But they wanted to take Patrick Surtain a couple of years ago. They wanted to take J.C. Horn a couple of years ago. They wanted to take Derek Stingley like everybody did the next year. They wanted to take the Sauce Gardner. But the board doesn't fall your way. So it's not a matter of you don't want to draft a cornerback. It just didn't fall your way. This year it fell your way. Same thing. They will consider, obviously, off-ball linebacker is one of the positions they've devalued, but they will consider it starting in the second round. But, you have to see where the board is. To me, the most likely scenario, they didn't get the offensive lineman in the first round, is they're going to get an offensive lineman in the second round for 2 reasons. What we just talked about, it's incredibly deep at that particular position, the draft. So there's going to be guys who are higher rated than a linebacker. So the Eagles are going to get an off-ball linebacker at some point in the process. It might be in the 4th round. If things break that way in the second round, it could be there. But they're not going to take an off-ball linebacker just because they have concerns over Nakobe Dean or Devin Whites. If one of those interior guys falls, and they can get a day 1 starter at right guard, they're always going to build that foundation up front on both sides of the football.
Absolutely, John. It's a great take. I mean, the kid from UConn who had a great Senior Bowl is a guy who's graded as one of the underrated guys in this upcoming draft here. And you look at him versus any of those linebackers, he's a better prospect.
Yeah, I mean, the kid
NFL,
from BYU,
I'm going O-line,
on
right?
board. Yeah, the kid from BYU, Jordan Moses. I mean, there's so many. Tyler Guyton hasn't gone
Tyler
yet.
Guyton hasn't been taken, right?
Unless he's been taking the last few picks when I've been on the air. But, yeah, I mean, there's so many good offensive linemen in this draft. And that just matches up foundationally with what the Eagles believe in. But, yeah, they need an off-ball linebacker. And the thing is, they're so weak at that position, they'll probably get a guy who can compete even if they go into the 4th round. Not to say they're going to win a job, but if they play well over the summer, they'll get a guy who's able to compete. What the last thing you want to do, though, is say, we got to upgrade linebacker and we're going to take a worse player. I mean, that's what bad teams do, and you see it all the time. I mean, Bo Nix, you were joking about experience at the college level. I mean, I worry about how much tread he's got left on his tire, and he's getting
completely. He's
42
overall. Years old, John. I mean, really?
Some of these quarterback desperate teams, Minnesota, I mean, they pigeonholed themselves. They got 3 picks already next year's draft because they have to give up so much to go up and get a quarterback who probably belongs in the second round. I mean, and Las Vegas was the quarterback. Atlanta pays Kirk Cousins $100 million, and they drafted a quarterback at number 8.
I did not get that. And John, think about Sean Payton for a minute. So he gives that kid from BYU all that money, and he was a gadget player. You give Bo Nix that high a draft pick, and you take him, and the only reason he got Breeze is because the Dolphins didn't want him, and they took Culpepper. That was the only reason that he landed in New Orleans. I sat there and I went like this, Bo Nix, he's like 25, 26 years old. What do you have? He's almost like that FSU kid that won the Heisman a couple years ago. What do you have tops with him? 6 years? I mean, it just the quarterbacks, it just shows you too, John, doesn't it? That the level of panic that some of these organizations have, they'll overvalue these quarterbacks. And it's just like the 2021 draft, John. 4 of the 5 kids that were drafted in that draft in recent days have been traded for third-day draft picks, which means Zach Wilson's a 7th rounder now or a 6th rounder now. Think about that.
And Denver just traded for him. Yeah, I mean, look, Williams, legitimate number 1 overall pick. Jaden Daniels, to me, legitimate top 5 pick. Drake May, legitimate top 10 pick. He probably went a little bit too high. The other 3 guys, they belong in the 2nd round. I'm going to be honest with you, at best. And they got picked in the top 12. So, I mean, it's a quarterback desperate league. We all understand why. But I guarantee you can look at the 3 general managers, and even Minnesota, which has the best situation because they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, and at least good offensive tackles. Maybe J.J. McCarthy can develop something because they also have a good offensive coaching staff. But I would bet, if I were a betting man, I would bet all 3 of those GMs would be are out of a job in 2 years.
Absolutely.
I would lean in that direction. I hope it doesn't happen. I don't wish that on anybody. No. By the way, George, another offensive tackle just went to the Packers to give that point. But I got to roll, Dan, because I got to talk to Howie Roseman and the new draft pick. But, it worked out well for the Eagles and Quinyon Mitchell, because that's a player that I thought they would have to go up and get. And because of the way the draft board fell, the Eagles didn't have to do anything.
Absolutely. John, appreciate your time. I know it's a busy night. Don't forget Birds 365 in the morning. We'll be right after them. We're doing a special 10 o'clock show. That'll be tomorrow. John, thank you so much for finding time for us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
You got it. That is John McMullen. All right, we'll take a quick time out here, come back, and we'll recap here. Hit the like button. Keep it here, National Football Show.